Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our community. What did they do to get started and what are they doing to stay there? And I have a special guest today. I'm getting to talk to Glynnis Swan. She is the Global Mobility Program Manager for Microsoft. She's also certified with her GPHR and her GMS-T. Glynnis, I'm so excited to have you on the show. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
You know, I always like to reflect back as I talk to my guests on the show. And for me and you, we both met a while back at Dallas HR, but it seems like we've seen a lot of each other lately. Of course, you were on the panel for NTRP. And then recently we were both in Chicago at ERC. What'd you think about ERC?
Oh my goodness, it was awesome. I that was my first time attending the fall conference. I've attended the spring conference. Oh my goodness. I'm not going to the spring one anymore. I'm coming to the fall one. It was great.
Yeah, no. Now, have you been to Chicago? I mean, I love the city of Chicago and the weather was great.
I do love Chicago. I used to have to travel there frequently for a former company that I worked for. My director was based there in Chicago, and I loved going there until one time I had to go in January, and the temperature was like -2. And I remember walking into the building and I saw the thermometer, and I was like, I stopped in the middle of the street on Wacker Avenue. I stopped and I said to, I don't know, anybody who was around me, I was like, does that say a -2? And that was the last time I went to Chicago.
That is a great story. I was just telling someone, I love Chicago when it's nice weather and I'm visiting. I'm not sure if I could live, but great city, lots of great people there. And man, that was just such a great, and we're going to talk about that conference. We're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about mobility. But before we get started, I would love for you to share the Glynnis Swan story. And like, where did you grow up? And how in the world did you get into HR and talent, mobility, and all things leadership?
Well, the Glynnis Swan story. Never heard of it that way before, but I am just a simple girl. I was born and raised on a small island, the island of Bermuda.
Hmm.
Its population is about 60,000 people. I immigrated to the US, I want to say in the late 90s. And I kind of just like looked for a job, right? And I ended up at Ernst & Young. That was back in the days when you applied out of a newspaper.
Okay.
I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I had a young child and I was, I knew I wanted to go to school, but at least part-time because I had to prepare, or I had to take care, of my young daughter. And so I just did that. I worked in what is now called the accounting center. And then I got into HR because there was a mass layoff. I had never experienced, a mass layoff. We went through rapid growth in building the accounting center. And then I just remember all of a sudden one day, a lot of my friends were no longer there. And that made me interested in why certain people were chosen to be let go. And that's what got me interested in HR. So when I finished my education at community college and I knew I was transferring to university, I decided to major in HR. Now, granted, I worked at an accounting firm, one of the big four accounting firms, but I did not want to major in accounting. That literally changed my life, and I knew I wanted to major in HR at that point. As far as leadership, I don't think, to be honest, I never really thought about leadership like that. I really don't think of myself as a leader. I'm very introverted. I'll lead like if I absolutely have to, but back then I never thought of myself as a leader.
That is very interesting. And by the way, that takes me back to finding a job through a newspaper. I mean, who does that anymore?
Right?
That is fantastic. And by the way, E&Y, we actually are also having another guest on the show in a couple of weeks. Andrew Walker. He's the Global Total Rewards leader. So I'm excited to have him on the show. But interesting you say that about leader. You've never really thought yourself as being a leader, but yet when I look at you as being a leader. You're serving the Dallas HR community in college relations. You were a panelist for the North Texas Relocation Professionals Group. And then, of course, when I saw you at ERC, I mean, you're speaking on all these panels, and that's interesting. So leadership, though, can be you can lead. That just tells me and reinforces that we can all lead from the front, from the middle, or from the back. Isn't that right?
That is so correct. That's so true. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned ERC because initially I wasn't slated to be on a panel. My boss was actually supposed to be on the panel, and then something came up, and he said, "Hey, Glynnis, you're still going to Chicago, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Well, can you do me a favor?" And, keeping in mind, I just started this job like 2.5 months ago. At that point, it was like 2 months. So I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I thought he wanted me to like meet with somebody. He was like, "So, can you do this panel?" And it was like, "I need you to speak." And I was like, "In front of people?" And he was like, "Yeah, you can do it." And so of course I'm like, "Yeah, sure." Oh my goodness. I was like trembling on the inside. But, I just thought, hey, my boss needs me to do something. It's talking about something that I love. So I'm just going to go do it. That's what I did.
I love that. A lot of times I talk about how people in our lifetime will push us into things that we didn't really feel like we normally wouldn't have signed up to do, but they
Right.
push us, and we look back and we're like, I'm so thankful that they pushed me. I've grown because of that. And
Yeah.
I think about that little push your boss gave you to speak. Hey, talk about, during your journey. I mean, you've come a long way, and
Yeah.
and you are definitely an expert in your field. We're going to talk about some of those things, but talk about just maybe some of the people that have helped you. I like to refer them to as mentors, or maybe they could be a sponsor, but who are a couple of people that have pushed you in your career to make you better?
Well, there have been quite a few people. I really had to think about it at different points in my career. I can really pick out, I would say, at least 4 people
Okay.
that um, helped me or helped to mold me and prepare me for business, and for my career. The first, going back to like my very first like real summer job, and this was back in Bermuda. Actually, she was the HR person, and her name was Sheila Hendrickson. And she taught me about dressing appropriately. Not that I wasn't dressed appropriately, but I worked at a utility company,
Okay.
and there were a lot of men there, like way too many. And my father actually worked at the same company, and she told me about maintaining a business presence. And I was like 16 or 17 years old. And then at EY, um, one of my strongest mentors from the last 2 decades, her name was Florence Williams. Awesome, awesome individual. And unfortunately, we just memorialized her a couple of
Mhm.
weeks ago. So I was really saddened about that. But without Flo, I would have never been able to work full time and go to school full time. So I told you about, my first career in the US being at EY. We worked in the accounting center. And of course, I was very well versed on all the company policies and everything. And I was reading one day, as I like to do. I'm the person that reads the policy from A to Z, everything. And I read about flexible work arrangements.
Mm.
And if you could imagine, this is back in the early 2000s. Not many companies we're doing this. And I said, hey, I can do this and I can probably go to school full time and hurry up and graduate, so that I can get like a real job. And right. I didn't realize, okay, so I was at EY. I'm gonna be honest. The only reason like I applied for a job there was because having come from Bermuda, I knew there was like an EY in Bermuda. Well, at that time they were calling it Ernst & Young. So I was like, hey, if I ever go home, then maybe I can just transfer. Like literally, that's why I chose to work for Ernst & Young. I could not even imagine the magnitude of the company I was working for. Flo was very instrumental in helping me to be to get a flexible work arrangement. Back then, if you were a non-client serving or non-revenue generating person, they didn't really let you do a flexible work arrangement. Little old me was one of the first to do that in the National Accounting Center at EY. So because of her, I'm forever grateful. There's two other people I would love to shout out. After EY, I ran across the street to Deloitte. It's literally right across the street. And
you just put your stuff in your boxes and you just walked right across the street.
Listen, literally right across the street. I didn't even have to change my parking spot. Like that's how it was, right? And
that's strategic.
Yeah, and they took a chance on me. I know you're gonna ask me about how I got into mobility later, but I had no mobility experience. And one of the mentors that I have that we still have an awesome relationship to this very day. Her name is Chandra Moulton. Well, she's recently married. So Chandra Moulton Wagoner, if she's listening. She was my senior when I first started at Deloitte. And she took the time to teach me everything that I needed to know about global mobility from the ground up. She taught me there are no shortcuts in global mobility. And to be the best, you have to know every facet of everything that you're doing. She was just promoted to partner at Deloitte Tax. So congratulations. And I always follow her lead, and she's just an awesome mentor. And then finally, I would like to talk about my mentor, Marie Huggins. Marie is a former manager and colleague of mine, and we have a great relationship. She is the one to keep me grounded and, keep me sane and just get me through rough periods in my career. Times when I'm just stressed out, and you know how mobility is. It's not all peaches and cream. So these four ladies definitely have been my mentors, and I love them all dearly.
What a blessing. What a blessing. I was going back even with your mentor in Bermuda, thinking about just dressing appropriately. I was talking to someone about a lot of times we don't think about, we always think about the do, but we don't think about the who we want to be, who we want to dress like, who we want to show up as.
Yeah.
And it sounds like she taught you even that, you said that business presence, just the little things that have made the big things in your life, right?
I'll tell you one thing she told me that sticks out is dress for the job you want, not for the job you have. So even though I was a summer student, and my mom, she always worked in fancy offices, and actually she supported expats when they came to Bermuda. She was an executive assistant. So I was always well dressed. I love to dress. If you ever see me in person, you know that I love shoes, clothes, and purses. But Miss Hendrickson, she taught me, just because you're a summer student doesn't mean you have to dress like a summer student. Dress how you want people to see you for the job that you want, not the job that you have. And I've always remembered that. So even at companies where I've worked, where there's like a casual, or dressed down. I worked at some places where I swear people look like they rolled out of bed in their pajamas, and I still didn't care if you could wear jeans and tennis shoes every day. I still dressed professionally. Not to say that I was like elitist or, thought I was better than anyone else. I just felt to be professional, I should be dressed as so.
I absolutely love that. For all of you listening right now, make sure you have a pen, a piece of paper, and take these notes. I love this. Dress for the job you want, not for the job you have. That is outstanding. And so sorry to hear about your friend Flo, but man, she was way ahead of everybody when it comes to
Yeah.
flexible work. And then congratulations to the partner at Deloitte.
Yeah.
I love that. And of course, Marie, everybody has to keep us grounded, have
Yeah.
somebody to talk to outside the workplace, and just,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, that is so good. I appreciate you sharing that. And I know that some of the folks that are listening, we all have these mentors. And I think it's just important that we all like reflect and not only think about the people that have helped us, but send them a note, find them a way to let them know how much they help. Because a lot of times we don't realize we're helping someone until somebody tells us, right?
We don't. And I'm going to tell you all, what you said is very relevant. Um, for my mentor, Flo, we used to get together at least 2 or 3 times a year, because she had a very important job at EY. She was there for 23 years. So I was just a small blip, in her life. Well, I was there for 8 years. So I guess I was a little bit of a blip, in her life. And earlier this year, everyone got busy. We lost track of time, and apparently that's when she got sick. And so a few weeks ago, I was writing out my to-dos and I was like, I have to make sure I get in contact with Flo because we're overdue, for a lunch. And then I get a notice that she's no longer with us. So if you are listening, if you have someone out there that have been saying, I need to get in touch with this person, please do that. Please do that.
I love that. I guarantee somebody out there right now has somebody on their mind. And just with you sharing that, they're going to reach out. I remember years ago reaching out to my former football coach. I had him on my mind about some things. And I wrote him a letter. And whenever he called me like, I don't know, a couple of weeks later after he got the letter and told me how much that letter meant to him. And I was just like, I wanted to tell you how much you meant to me, but
Yeah.
we just, and that, that lifts them up, lifts us up. And as I said, my first book, Find Your Lane, it's all about lifting, be a lifter, find a way to lift. I love that. I love that. Hey, let me ask you this. We kind of started off a little bit about leadership, and you basically said, hey, I don't really look at myself as a leader, yet you're leading. But I want to read something because this is a leadership sentence if I ever heard one. And so I was, of course, looking at your LinkedIn profile before we got on, and I noticed this. It says this: as an agent of change, I don't just settle for best practice. I seek the next practice. I just love that. Like, what I want to know is, like, where did that come from? Did that come from all of those mentors in your life? Where did that come from for you to continue to drive change?
Well, I wrote that and I truly believe that because if I don't like being complacent. I mean, we all like being comfortable, in doing what we do, but I get uncomfortable when I'm too comfortable doing something because I know that as soon as I get super comfortable, change is going to happen. Change is always coming.
Mm.
And I like to be on top of that. I am a very organized person. And, I like to attack change and I like to have a seat at the table to help people adapt to change. So if I notice that something is not right, I'm not going to just sit there and wait until someone else figures out how to fix it. I'm going to try to fix it. I remember when I was working at Deloitte, and this would have been the early 2000s. And if you remember back at that time, a lot of companies were opening offices in India or
Mhm.
China and offshoring and doing all sorts of things. And I remember we had this office, in India, and it was my first time having to work, with people, in another country, like that, where
Mhm.
we would be collaborating on a daily basis. And I noticed that there were a lot of things I'll now call them miscommunications, or things like that that was impeding the flow of work. And I realized I can't be the only one, who's encountering this. And so I started asking other people, hey, are you having problems with this? Or, is this occurring on your team? I went outside of my team, and I was asking, and I realized that we were all having, similar problems. So I can't remember who I spoke to, but I started Googling diversity. And it's so funny because I think Google was probably just coming out.
Right.
That's so funny to say, Googling diversity
Mm.
because, but that's what I did. I happen to remember the term diversity because
Mhm.
back in 2002, and I know I'm dating myself, but back in 2002, I took a class at UT Arlington called Diversity in Organizations.
Mm.
No one was talking about diversity back then. I had never heard of diversity. And actually, that was under Dr. Myrtle Bell, who was an awesome professor. She is now the dean of DNI at UT Arlington, and I still communicate with her. I will call her one of my mentors also. Beautiful person. And she taught this revolutionary class back in 2002 when no one was talking about diversity. I happen to remember that term, diversity and organizations. And so I Googled because I felt like this would help me and my team to work with our new colleagues in India.
Mm.
I I learned about the Texas Diversity Council that had recently been established in a chapter had recently been established in Dallas. And so I went and I joined that chapter as an individual member, meaning I paid for it. My company did not pay for it. To this day, in 2021, I am still an individual member of that chapter because I like to learn about best practices. But back then in 2007 or 8, whatever it was, I used what I learned to help my colleagues and I work better with our India team. From that, uh, Deloitte in our Dallas office established somehow, what was it called, a regional DNI representative. And
Mhm.
that was me. I was appointed the regional DNI representative,
Hmm.
right? And that began my journey in diversity and inclusion. So and that all started from me just looking for a better way, to work with my colleagues in a different country.
I love that. First of all, for you having the courage to ask those questions, right? To see
Yeah.
that there's change needed. But also when you said earlier, just for the job you want, not for the job you have, you're like dressing your mindset also, right? Because you're going to Arlington, you're like, hey, I want to check this out. I want to help people.
Yeah.
I want to get better. I just absolutely love that. I just, as I think about that, as you're telling that story, I was thinking about Glynnis. I was thinking about when I wasn't the president of Dallas HR yet. I was a board member, I believe member engagement at the time, a director. And I remember we had a diversity representative on the board. And I remember a couple of years, nobody really knew
Um,
what that was. We didn't really do anything with it. Or let me rephrase that. Nobody really found a place, or the person that was leading or whatever the case may be, it just didn't like have a place. And so I remember when I became, I think it was president elect at the time, but around that time, we just rolled that under, I think, like workforce planning. Like we just didn't realize the importance
mhm.
of that particular role. And I think it goes back to what you were just talking about. You were asking the question. You're trying to figure out how can I, and I think that's what we all need to do is we got to be more curious.
Yeah. And I think, in this discussion with you, I'm sitting here thinking, what prompted me to do that? Other than I know I had to get work done, right? And so I
Yeah.
had to find a way. But I think also I know how it feels to
Mm.
not be understood sometimes, or to be looked at a certain way. And I don't want other people to feel that way. Coming from another country, and when I first moved here, I had a very strong accent. The reason my accent is a little watered down now is because I purposely covered up my accent. Because when I moved here, people made me, they mocked me, or they made fun of certain words that I said, or I had one manager that just made me repeat words because she thought it was funny, to hear me say that.
Hmm.
So I covered up, and I did a lot of things that I wish I didn't have to. So I think I understand how it feels, to be different, to be in a different environment, to get people to understand that just because I don't sound like you, or I don't look like you, I'm not dumber than you, I'm just different. So I think maybe that's what prompted me. I really don't know, but I was just thinking about that as you're talking. I'm
Well, that
sorry.
makes
I'm sorry to
no,
get off
no,
track.
you're good. I love that. I want you to continue that, because that makes me feel I'm even more proud of you, because you're helping people like no other. I was actually thinking about, somebody told me one time I'm a really good encourager, and I love to encourage people. I love to lift
Yeah,
people up. And the reason why is because I remember younger how that felt. You just
yeah,
said how that feels and how
yeah,
that felt. And I think those are the times when we can really make impact in the workplace. It doesn't matter what role we're having. When we've felt something, like someone that is like, we're going to talk about global mobility, but when someone is relocated, they know how that feels.
yeah,
Right. So
yeah.
now they can talk to someone, but if they haven't relocated, they don't know how that feels. I want to ask you, right before we get into that, I want to ask you this. I always like to ask the question around purpose, because I feel like you found your lane in your career. That's what I like to call it. Like you found like that purpose. Uh,
Mhm.
Talk about that. Have you found your lane, and when did you find your lane? Like, was it all these moments are put together and you're like, one day you're like, hey, I love what I do? Or was there a moment when you just said, you know what, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life?
You know what? I think I just found my purpose last year in the midst of COVID.
Mm.
I was always content with being, well, let me just back up. When I was a little girl, my mom worked in an office, and I just knew I was going to work in an office. I didn't know what I was going to do, right? I just knew that my mom worked in a nice big office with like the best office supplies, right? And side note, I love like pens and pencils and supplies and things like that, right? So I just was like, I'm going to work in an office, and I'm going to have all the best office supplies ever. I never knew what I was going to do in the office, right? So when you fast forward, to pre 2020, that's what I was doing. I was working in the office. I landed in mobility. I don't know if you want me to tell you about how I landed
I
there
would love to hear it.
now, but
Yes.
well, when I left EY, it was because the department I was working for was being sold, and I wanted the safety and security of a larger organization rather than to go to a small organization. At that point, I had two young kids, and I just needed that stability. I had been president of the Toastmasters Club at EY, which was big for me because remember, I am an introvert. I don't remember how I was bamboozled into being the president and resurrecting this club, but somehow I was. And one of the people I worked, that was a member of the club, she had left EY and went across the street to Deloitte. in global mobility. Remember, I said I just wanted to work in the office. So I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I was a tax, what was my title? I worked in arbitrage rebate
Okay.
in tax, which deals with bonds and different things like that. And I just knew I needed a job. So I called Rebecca across the street and I said, hey, Bex, do they have any jobs over there at Deloitte? She was like, yeah, so what do you know about global mobility? And I was like, yeah, I guess I know something. What do you know about expats? I was like, oh, I know all about expats. I'm from Bermuda and, expats always came there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I know about expats. My grandmother actually had a home and she rented out one of her apartments to a British family of expats. And they
Wow.
had two young daughters, and they were the expats that were on assignment like forever. And so I grew up, with the little girls that lived below my grandmother's house. So I was like, yeah, I know all about expats. And my mom's boss was an expat. So yeah. So she was like, okay, well, I'll let you come on over. So she referred me to work at Deloitte. Now I had no idea about expats, global mobility, nothing. That's how I ended up, in global mobility. So fast forward to 2020, the whole 14 years I have been in global mobility was on the supplier side.
Right.
I had one little stint internal Deloitte on the corporate side, but the vast majority supplier side. Well, I knew that I was good at what I did. And at the onset of COVID, I was laid off.
Mm.
And I didn't know what I was going to do. What am I going to do? Like, my life is mobility, and no one was hiring in mobility because no one was moving,
Mm.
right? It was like, no, you're not going anywhere. So I didn't know what to do, and I thought I was going to just take a vacation, but 2 weeks into it, I was restless. The thing is, I still had clients who were calling me to ask me questions, even though I was no longer working at the company.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also had a lot of friends and people who knew that in my circle, I'm called like the ghost writer. I write things for people, I
Mm.
review things for people. And so they were calling me for help to do their resumes. And so what did I do? I decided to create a company, my own LLC, so that I could continue to give advice, but also make some money because I had no job.
I got to pay my bills.
Right.
Yes.
And it was at that point that I learned that I could be a business person. I never wanted to own a business. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
was comfortable working in someone's office, doing whatever. But I created a business and it became successful. One of my largest clients I did career coaching and resume and interview prep, and things like that. And one of my major clients is called the Black in HR. They actually they help everyone,
Mm-hmm.
but they cater to people who look like me, who will not typically get coaching, and help like that. And I'll tell you, when I found my purpose, when I realized that I had helped over 200 people
Mm-hmm.
who look like me to get jobs, to get substantial raises, to navigate conflict within their companies, and to do things like that. That's when I found my purpose.
Mm.
That is what makes me happy. And it wasn't the money that I get from it, it is the text messages, the emails, and the phone calls from these clients saying, Glynnis, I just accepted a job offer making $45,000 more than I did. Or, I'm working for my dream company. I just, that is what drives me, to still want to do that. Of course, I still love doing mobility. I do that during the day. And I do my coaching during the evenings and weekends.
Mm. I got to tell you, I have chills right now listening to that story. That is so powerful. And little do we realize all along the journey, we're getting ourselves ready because we
Yeah,
keep growing, we keep getting better to put us in position to help that person. And
yeah.
we feel like no other. That is incredible.
And I'll tell you, Bruce, that is honestly something that I would do until I die.
Mm.
If so my husband asked me, when I got this new job at Microsoft, he was like, okay, so you're quitting the other stuff, right? I was like, no,
Mm.
no. Not that I need any extra money or anything, but this is something that I truly love to do. This
Mm.
is what fulfills me. And I don't care if I won the lottery, I would do this for free.
Mm.
My goal, and I'll share that. I really haven't shared this with a lot of people, Bruce. So I'm going to share it with you because you're my friend. Um, and you never know who's listening. That's one thing I learned as a leader, right? You never know who's listening.
That's right.
If I could, or what my goal is to be able to help people who are recently released from jail, with nonviolent offenses, of course, to
Yeah.
help integrate them back into the workforce. I would love to help victims of domestic violence
Mm.
who, for one reason or the other, have to get back into the workforce. I would love to help foster kids who have aged out of the system, who have not really had any direction, on getting ready for a career and things like that. If if money was no issue,
Mm.
that's who I would spend my time helping.
That's when you found your purpose, you found your lane in not just your career, you found your lane in life. As you share that, I think about how much that aligns with SHRM. They have a program giving people second chances. And there's so many opportunities there. But I was thinking also, you're also the 2022, you're going to be a board member for the North Texas Relocation Professionals, which I'm excited
Yeah.
about that. And one of the
Mhm.
things we do at the holiday is we collect teddy bears for the
Mhm.
DFW, the Dallas and Fort Worth police departments to give to children to help them during domestic abuse situations. So more to come on that. But man, this is so good. I just love how, it really is true. You just validated it. And that is, you've heard the quote, when you find the work you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Isn't that true?
Yep. That is something actually that I share with I have two children. They're older now. My daughter's 24 and my son is 19. And I remember when my daughter was a senior in high school and she told me that she wanted to major in social work. And she was worried because people, like adults, were telling her, why do you want to major in social work? Like, you're never going to make any money. And my daughter was devastated because that is, the career she chose. And she was like, should I choose something else? Am I going to make enough money, to live? And I told her, I said, you know what? Life is too short
Mm.
to to get a job just because you think you're going to make money. As long as you are doing something you love, like you said, you will never work a day in your life. Um, I told her it's horrible to have a job that you think you like, or you like the paycheck that you hate going to every day.
Mm.
And she decided to continue being a social worker. Like I said, she's now 24. She is working on her doctorate in social work.
That is
She
great.
is a therapist. She is, planning to have her own practice. She is thriving. And I remember telling her, I said, I don't care if you want to be a clown. If you want to be a clown, we are going to find the best clown college and you're going to be
Mm.
the best thing on clown you can be if that's what you love to do. She laughed when I told her that, but I give that advice to anyone.
Yeah.
It's do what you love. And I truly love helping people.
Do what you love and be the best at it. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what it is, make a contribution and be the best at it. Oh my gosh,
Oh,
Glynnis, this is
oh,
so good. I love this. Man, my head is just spinning with questions. And I do want to ask you, you're new, like, so you're new to your current position. You just joined your company not too long ago.
yeah.
And I know that you're excited about what's ahead. But the question I have for you is around someone that just starts with a company.
Uh-huh.
What do you like? Do you have like a I don't know, when the new president comes in, they said, hey, they have a 100-day plan, in 100 days, we're going to look and see what success. Did you
Right.
do you have a plan going into a role like that? What are you thinking about like that first 90 days, or are you just trying to like assess? I mean, talk about just like, what is your thought process? Because there's going to be some people listening that maybe they just started a company and they're just like
Uh-huh.
not sure, trying to find their lane. How do you find your lane in a new role?
Oh my goodness. So that is probably a good question right now because it's going to force me to be very vulnerable in my answer. um, it's a struggle. This is only the fourth job that I've like applied for, not counting acquisitions, and things like that. Um, I don't move around a lot in jobs because I like to choose, things that companies that I plan to be with for a long time. This company, though, is so huge that I don't know when I'm going to find my lane. Um, I started with a plan, and I'll tell you that I've had to be agile and
Hmm.
just be ready for change. I started with Microsoft August 23rd of this year. And I thought, oh, it's global mobility. I've been doing this for 15 years. There's nothing I don't know. Big shocker is I am no longer on the supplier side. I am now on the corporate side. And the way of thinking is totally different,
Mhm.
right? Um, and there's so much that's going on within mobility. I started, during this pandemic where we're not sure if some programs are going to be virtual and, things are going on. Microsoft itself is like a giant. There's 1,000,003 things to learn just about the company. So all the plans that I made, I said, okay, I'm going to complete all my mandatory training, which I did that.
Yep.
I'm going to get to know these people. There's like 50,000 people that I need to know. I have to write everything down. I'm older than I was when I started, other jobs. And you know how your brain gets when you're a little older, right? So I'm writing things down and I'm learning where I just wanted to fit in. I just thought within 2 months, I will fit in. I'll know what I'm supposed to do and be able to do it. I'm going to be honest with you. It's not that easy. However, I have the support of an awesome team.
Mm.
I have the support of an awesome boss. I have been given grace. And I was told, hey, you're not going to know what you're really doing in at least 6 months. They told me that at the beginning, but me being who I am, I was like, it's not going to take me 6 months. Like I'm gonna knock this out. And what I had to do, Bruce, was I literally, as recently as last week, had to step back and accept that grace,
Mm.
period, and figure out that I'm going to fit in eventually. And when I say fit in, I don't mean that like that I don't fit in with my colleagues or whatever, but they have allowed me time to learn what I need to learn about Microsoft. What I have found is that if you don't know the people to go to and you don't learn all of these other little things, right? You're never really going to fit in correctly. So taking the time, taking the grace, being vulnerable, speaking up and letting people know what you need. One of the things that I really struggled with was this multitude of meetings and people just putting stuff on my calendar until it became overwhelming. And then I had a conversation with one of the people charged with my onboarding, and she said, Glynnis, here you are empowered. If you don't want to meet, or if you have 3 competing meetings, you can tell people no. You don't have to be on every meeting. You can tell people no. And that's actually one of my weaknesses. So like, I'll tell you, when I have interviews and people, and they ask you in the interview, what is your weakness? That's one of my weaknesses, is telling people no. So I'm working on that. I'm a work in progress. But I my plans just went out the window. Let's just put it that way. So you can make plans, you can write all the plans you want. When you're going into a different environment, you have to be willing to adapt, be willing to step back and get a whole layout, or of who is who and what is going on, and give yourself that time to find out where you fit in and not try to force it. And I think that's what's helping me to be successful, is I just stop trying to force it.
Oh, I love that. Stop trying to force it. Let it come. It's like sports. Let the game come to you. I love every single thing about that. But the 2 words that I love the most are accept grace.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we're not, like, we don't accept it. Like, it's just accept it.
Yes.
And I tell people all the time, and speaking up, learn to say no. I'm a work in progress. You're talking my language here, Glynnis. But whenever you talk about the most important thing too is investing in people. Like you're talking, everything you're talking about is investing in people, investing in relationships, getting to know people. How can we all work together to accomplish the vision, the mission, the objectives of the organization? Isn't that true?
Let me tell you something. Investing in people, you are talking my language now. Having managed people, I think back to one of the last roles I had, and I was tasked with managing a team, and I realized very early on that I'm very particular. I like things a certain way, but I also realized that people don't do everything my way, and that's fine. However, if you want people to do things a certain way, you have to invest the time in them and show them how it should be done. So I remember I had some colleagues, and we all had, teams that we had to manage. And my team of people, I'll just say they were awesome. Not because I was their manager, right? But because I took the time out at the beginning of our relationship to build a relationship, to talk to them, to ask them what is it that they need to be successful, right? I believe that a leader is someone who is humble and authentic. And remember, I never thought of myself as a leader, right? But when I think about it now, it's, I just always remained humble and authentic. And a leader should also know when to follow and recognize what your people need to succeed and give them the tools that they need to succeed. That's the key. You have to give them the tools or help them to find the tools. You don't just tell them, or you don't just expect them to do it. So when I think back to my team, we never really had much conflict. Everyone was able to service their clients efficiently and effectively. We never had any issues on my team. Never. And not to say that we were perfect, but in the grand scheme of business, it was a well-oiled machine. And that's how I was taught. When I go back to my mentor, Chandra from Deloitte, that's how we operated. She took time and she invested in me. She taught me everything from the ground up. Her and another manager that I had, they took the time to teach me everything from the ground up. And so I just paid it forward. And I invested that time and everything that I learned in my team. And then I have, some colleagues who they're like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, because if you put in the time at the beginning, you get less headache on the back end. I subscribe to that. I will always believe in that. So I will always invest the time, whether it's in my team, whether it's in the students that I'm mentoring, or clients that I'm coaching. Because at the end of the day, my goal is to help people, right? To be successful.
Well, I gotta tell you that first of all, man, you show Chandra incredible gratitude by you paying it forward, right? And just everything you said there, I just love it. I know all of the listeners are going to get so much out of this. It is so good. Hey, I want to ask you one last question
Sure.
before we go to it's time to accelerate and wrap this up. And the question I always like to, I mean, you've given some incredible advice, but I always like to ask this question. Were you ever given any advice? It was just so good that you might have got it from one of your mentors, one of your family members, from your daughter, from someone. It was so good. You just find yourself always sharing that advice.
Okay. This was some advice that I was given at my first quote unquote summer job. I was working in the accounting department, and it was CYA. And I remember the lady's name. Her name was Miss Judy Gibson. This was back in Bermuda.
Okay.
And she said, Glynnis, if I don't teach you anything else, it's CYA. I was like, what is CYA? And she said, cover your, you know what? And I was like, well, what is that? And, she just said, you always make sure that your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. To this day, my I's are dotted and my T's are crossed.
That's where that, you said earlier in the show, you're the person that reads the policy from the
Yes.
beginning to the end, because that's important to you. And I think that particular, that's very important for an organization to have someone that does that. Cause I mean, give the policy to me, man, I'll just scan it. I'll scan it. Hey, it looks good. Let's move on. We need people like you and others that have that mindset, right?
Well, and one thing is because I love to read, but also when you are affecting other people's money, their relocation,
yes,
their children's interest, in an international country, they're not reading the policy. Well, some of them may, right? But in that high stressful moment, they may not be paying attention to everything in the policy. And I take it very seriously, whether I'm advocating for someone, helping someone to relocate, trying to find the best supplier, or partner for a role. I like to look at all the fine print, and I like to make sure that all my bases are covered. I like to plan for contingencies, and that only comes from CYA.
All I know is if I was relocating, I would want you in front managing my relocation, because I'd know I was being taken care of. And so thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. I guarantee you that it's going to help some people. We're going to move to the last few minutes with it's time to accelerate. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions here. First question I want to ask you, you're a reader. Would you rather read a book or listen to a podcast?
I feel like that's a loaded question because we're doing a podcast now. But I'm going to be honest. I love to read books.
Yeah.
I love to read.
Yeah, me too. I love to crease them, highlight them, underline them. I like taking screenshots of them.
I don't crease books. You don't crease the pages. We use bookmarks, Bruce. We respect books.
I need to give me some bookmarkers. You just gave me an idea. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Hey, well, this is being played in November, and November is a great time to be thankful. And I just want to ask you this: what are you most grateful for?
I am most grateful, honestly, for my family. I love my family. They are the only thing that is constant and that I know I can always rely on. And so that's what I'm thankful for. Even in my times when I'm at my worst, my family is always there for me.
Man, that's beautiful. I love that. I love that. Hey, well, let me ask you this one final question as we wrap
Sure.
up here. And this is one of my favorite questions I like to ask. And the question is, Glynnis, 10 years older, is
Ooh.
knocking at your front door, and you're going to get up and you're going to go answer that door. What is she going to tell you?
She's gonna say, don't be afraid, of what the future brings. Remember where you were 10 years ago and where you are now. It's only going to be better 10 years from now.
I love that. Oh my gosh. That is a wise Glynnis, 10 years older. I love that.
Yeah,
Oh man, I told you the time was going to fly. It
it was. It's been
absolutely
a great
has
conversation, Bruce.
it has flown by. I cannot wait to watch your journey ahead with Microsoft and your role, helping people, all of the things that you're doing. You are definitely, listen, you are definitely driving in the leadership lane. And I'm so excited for you. Hey, if somebody's listening to this podcast and they said, Glynnis said something that I need to learn more about, how would be the best way that they should or could connect with you?
I am simple. You can catch me on LinkedIn at
Mm.
Glynnis, Glynnis Swan, Swan. That's where I'm at.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today, your perspective. I guarantee you there are going to be some people out there that this is going to be helpful. It's just come at the right time. Great, just some great information, encouragement, just lifting people up. And I just love what you're doing. And I can't wait to watch it ahead. And I cannot wait to share this podcast. So I appreciate you and of course our friendship, Glynnis.
Thank you so much, Bruce.
Okay, I'll talk to you later.
Okay.